This organization put out a great survey. They did in the height of COVID because we wanted to understand what's happening because of COVID with software audits, right? And there's a link to get to the survey. And so let's just share some data from the survey. First of all, the sweet spot is 250 to 999 employees. Why do you think that is, Don?
Let me make a serious analogy for this. Where does traffic revenue generation systems actually set up? Do they set up in extremely poor areas, extremely rich areas? Well, no, because the poor people really can't pay any tickets, and the rich people have ways to defend themselves. It's the mass in between that both have the resources to pay and don't have the time to actually go and defend themselves. It's the same thing with the great middle number of companies like you all are probably part of in one form or another that are able to pay but aren't really able to devote the resources to defend yourself. That's why the middle here is the most pronounced and prominent source of revenue generation for these types of audits, or any of them.
Right, very clear. Small enough, but big enough to pay the bill. But you can't really defend yourself. And then the big organization, well, that's easy. We can find a really big problem. You're going to have to write a really big check.
But they also have big lawyers that are able to drag it out for a very long time and often are willing.
So then we said, when was the last time your organization was audited? And I found this really interesting. 40% within a year. Okay.
See the frequency increase? This is amazing to me. 20 years ago, this was once every 10 years on a lark, and it was shocking that it would happen.
The survey surmises that due to COVID, companies were looking for ways to make up lost revenue, and audits represented a trigger or a lever that they could push to generate more revenue.
And like a lot of things, this was happening before COVID. COVID just increased the opportunity to make it happen.
And so you have almost a 70% chance every 3 years. We see it roughly 3 to 5 years seems to be the audit cycle, unless there's an audit trigger.
Remember, you're not paranoid if they really are out to get you.
Audit triggers are things like you acquire another company. We see a high correlation to audits, right? You're exiting an Oracle Unlimited license agreement, high correlation to audits, right? So there are things that the vendors are looking at. We had one customer, a retail operation I guarantee almost everybody here has used and probably drives by all the time. They got 6 vendor audits in 1 year. Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, it just kept going on and on. So clearly something was happening that all the vendors were triggering off of. What were the top 3 vendors to audit you?
Gee, I wonder.
Microsoft's number 1. I expect that to go down, actually, but historically Microsoft does the most. They also outsource it to a lot of third parties, big accounting firms.
But like a lot of statistics, this is misleading. Next slide, sir.
Oh, and what were the issues that were identified? Unlicensed features.
So how many of you, when you audit, when you implement, install, utilize Oracle, understand completely the extremely expensive, very sophisticated features like obviously real application clusters, but particularly partitioning and some of the advanced security features? They're extremely expensive. And if somebody, a DBA, inadvertently or intentionally installs a partition table, guess what?
So it's very common for people to turn on software, especially when you don't have license keys. Easy to make the mistake.
No way to stop it, really.
Virtualization. That's a direct one about policy versus contractual obligation, right? Did not purchase enough licenses. Did not purchase the right amount of licenses. Oracle standard license is actually quite limiting. That was a shock to me when I got in the business. You mean I bought your most broad license and only to find out it was the most limiting license? We almost went to court over that one. Rogue installations. Oh, Java's ripe for rogue installations, right? Subsidiaries, acquisitions. And so we've got this whole nice list. And then what we did, it was correlated by the vendor. Half the audits dealt with virtualization. So if you were doing some sort of virtualization, guaranteed during the audit, that policy is going to hit you.
That's why
in the
this
face.
cottage industry exists, and this is, your pain is 100% preventable. Remember, Major League Pitching and Major League Hitting.
Right. Unactivated license, did not purchase another license, 1 out of 3 for Oracle, right? 1 out of almost 40% for IBM, right? Wrong license type. You go to a vendor to sell you licenses, and they sell you the wrong type. Whose fault is it? It's your fault. Your license. Vendor comes in and audits you. They don't audit the person that sold you the license.
Channel partners, and just be careful.
Just understand, they're going to go after you. Maybe you have recourse on who you bought the licenses from, right? Geographical restrictions. When you bought the licenses, maybe you're a US-based operation. One day you buy an operation somewhere else in the world. You get audited. Does your contract spell all that out? All right, additional charges by vendor. What I find really interesting here is that about 1/3 of the Oracle audits, almost Microsoft, over $1 million.
I understand the point I was making before, that although Microsoft audits more, Oracle generates more revenue, and certainly as a percentage of its overall revenue out of the audits.
So then I found this one really interesting. Now, I'm in the business, right? So take it for a sales pitch if you want, right? Did you engage a third party to assist you? And what was really interesting is 66% said no. That's like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
We have endless metaphors of this kind.
Right? I just remember that scene. It doesn't make any sense. Right? And then when we asked, well, the people who did engage somebody, did it help? 92% of the time.
Again, engaging is one thing. Engaging with a partner who will actually be helpful to you is another one. Picking the right management software or audit defense company is everything, especially when it happens.